Hi everyone, my name is Johnny and I'm the conference manager of Aviation Festival Asia. I'm delighted to introduce this morning's panel looking at marketing insights from some of the leading marketing figures from airlines across Asia. We do have a really good audience this morning as well, just looking at my screen in front of me. So the moderator for this session is Shashank Nigam. He is the founder and CEO of Simply Flying. Shashank is joined by senior representatives from AirAsia, Hong Kong Express, Japan Airlines and Jazeera Airways. If you have any questions, please do post them in the Q&A on the bottom of your screen. And without further ado, I will pass you over to Shashank, who will begin this panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. And good morning, everyone in Singapore and viewing from Asia. It is late evening for me here in Canada, but much easier than I think some of the 2 a.m. nights we've done being on this panel with some of the panelists here who are smiling. So welcome, everyone. It's been quite the year for aviation. And you might think that all the aviation marketers in the world were twiddling their thumbs, waiting for the pandemic to get over, to then start doing something. Oh, no. It's been a very, very busy year because things have changed. Things have changed dramatically when it comes to building trust in travel. It's almost like starting from scratch again. Just try asking some of the panelists here, who I will introduce in a minute, in just a couple of minutes. But I wanted to just set the stage for how marketing has evolved in just the last 1 year, how things used to be done and how they're being done from a product and marketing standpoint. I've got a little presentation to begin with, based on a white paper we published at Simply Flying just a couple of months ago, actually. So it's just a before and after. How has aviation marketing evolved? Previously, you would always see beautiful A380 pictures from the Gulf carriers. Andrew might smile here because he was part of that brigade who brought magic back to flying. You would see beautiful 787s in the Star Wars livery from Japan Airlines, or you will see the bright red AirAsia planes. It was about modern aircraft. It was about the fleet and the seats and things like that. Now it's about enhanced cleaning. It's about how clean my aircraft is. These are all the measures we are taking to keep it clean and safe. Health safety truly matters. Today, customers are just as concerned about how clean and how well ventilated the aircraft is or the airport is as they are thinking about booking their travel. And airlines have been highlighting everything from hospital grade sanitizations to what they're doing to ensure peace of mind. Apex, together with Simply Flying, actually launched the gold standard for airline health safety, and a few airlines like Japan Airlines have hit the highest diamond rating for that as well. So I'm sure we'll hear more on that from Akira-san from Japan Airlines shortly. The emphasis has moved on from comfortable seats to HEPA filters, and whether 100% of the fleet has HEPA filters on board. It is not about comfort. It is about ensuring good ventilation. So expect more and more airlines not to market a nice flat bed with a flight attendant putting a blanket over you. Those days are really gone. Now, this actually is a level playing field now for low-cost airlines and legacy airlines, because everyone's got HEPA filters. And no one is really talking about comfortable seats. It's about whether you are taking care of air circulations. We move on from meals to masks. There was this 5-course dinner. In fact, I remember AirAsia, the last time I flew them, their nasi biryani was so nice. I actually bought another one at KL Airport from one of the counters. I'm glad that they're doing food delivery now, because I know lots of people like their food. But guess what? People don't care about what food they're being served. Is everyone wearing the mask? Is the mask rule being enforced? I know the government's mandated, but can the airlines actually enforce it? It's a big deal in North America, where you often see fights erupting based on people wearing masks or not. I know that's not the case in Asia, definitely not as much, but it's important. Meals are now prepackaged. The last time I flew, every single element in my business class meal was individually wrapped. That means it came straight from the kitchen to my table without anyone touching it. And that did give me assurance. It helped me with building confidence as well. Previously, airlines used to tout their global network. How many destinations can you fly to? But now, with zero COVID, as lots of countries in Asia are aspiring towards, and we still face lockdowns in places from Malaysia to Singapore to Hong Kong, the talk is about air bridges. In fact, Singapore, Hong Kong is a prime example of the air bridge or the air bubble that has tried to go on and then popped and then tried to go live and then popped. We are potentially likely to see these air bubbles or air bridges restarting international travels rather than just countries with domestic markets. And then finally, we used to have branded partnerships with Disney, with Star Wars, with Kung Fu Panda. You think about it, and there was a branded partnership. But today, the branded partnerships are all about cleanliness partnerships. We've got Clorox, Lysol, Dettol, Lifebuoy, all of these coming into the cabin. Why? Because the moment the passenger steps on board, there's a sense of familiarity. There's a sense of, yes, I like that the airline is taking care of me. So branded partnerships have evolved towards cleanliness partnerships. You can visit Simplifying to download the full white paper. It's free of charge. But I thought I will use that to start off the discussion here and introduce my panelists based on how things have changed. So let me first start with Akira Mitsumasu, who is the VP of Marketing at Japan Airlines. He's based in Tokyo. Welcome, Akira-san. And then we have got Eric Thane, who is, Eric, are you in Hong Kong?
Yes, Hong Kong.
Good. So Eric is still in Hong Kong. He's not flying around. It's good to check these days.
I'm trying to fly around.
We're all trying, aren't we? We're all
Yes.
trying, aren't we? And then we've got Siddharth Butalia from AirAsia. And Siddharth, where are you today?
I'm in Bangalore today, actually.
You are in Bangalore. I hope you're keeping safe and well yourself. And we also have Andrew Ward, who is joining us from Kuwait at Jazeera Airways.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. We are very well. It's good to see a familiar set of faces once again as we talk marketing. And let me pose a question to all of you first, just to kickstart our conversations. How do you think, what is the role of marketing in helping rebuild trust post-pandemic? And I know all of you have a huge experience in marketing, both within airlines, legacy, LCCs, all of it. So I'd love to just go down the room here, the virtual room, to discuss and hear your thoughts on how do we rebuild trust in travel as marketers. Maybe Akira-san, we can start with you first and we go westward.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for the introduction, Shashank. And you're absolutely right that marketing has changed dramatically. I mean, the focus has shifted from what we had previously, shouting about our products and the quality, to really on what customers want to hear most, and that's about safety. I think there are many ways in which marketing can play an important role, but I'll just mention 4 key ways. One, as you've mentioned, is really convey message around health safety, about enhanced hygiene measures. We have, for example, in Japan Airlines, our Agile Fly Safe cover, Agile Fly Safe program, and the insurance Corona cover. We also talk a lot about attitude and social norm, things like protect yourself and others. And we also have to convey message around having control, because that's the thing that most travelers want to understand better, to have more control about their journey. So updated information and providing flexibility, giving them a sense of control over the trip. So we have, for example, started using tools like VeriFly and the IATA Travel Pass to try to facilitate some of the pain points and reduce them. And at the same time, to reduce the psychological safety that many people feel that they don't have. And thirdly, is to really convey message around mutuality and reciprocity, because travel, at the end of the day, is really about connecting people, about being together, about acceptance, respect, and tolerance. And it's really the opposite of what we see a lot lately on strife, division, and taking sides in polarized disputes. So it's really conveying message around us building this sense of mutuality and reciprocity. And somewhat related to that is convey, as it mentioned, Shashank, message around familiarity, which builds trust. I remember when I visited Singapore on business trips, many shopkeepers would recognize me and we would have sort of short, casual conversation. It gives me a sense of familiarity and it's kind of connectedness, that the shopkeeper is a familiar face to me and I am a familiar face to him or her. So travel creates these sort of connections and familiarity with people and places, and that in itself also creates trust. So we have been communicating through social media many familiar aspects that people remember about travel, and things Japanese, like short phrases you hear in streets, food like ramen and sushi, and sceneries like sakura cherry blossom, and all that just give people a sense of familiarity and say that yes, it is not altogether foreign now. It's still something that I can relate to and know. So, yeah. And you're absolutely right, we have been super busy over the past 16 months.
I know, exactly. No, thank you so much, Akira-san, for sharing that perspective. We will come back to health passports, by the way. But I'm curious, Eric, how is it going for you in the low-cost world in Hong Kong? I mean, borders have been pretty much shut closed, isn't it?
Yes, I think we can all agree. I'd like to address that too. That never been busier. You know, it's 1.5 years, right? Yeah, I definitely concur with some points Akira made. Right, I think the focus on marketing has definitely shifted, but I also like to make the point that the basics of marketing, the holy grail of marketing does not change, right? It's always about the customer, right? It's about connecting with them, right? And about rebuilding trust, I think there are many ways. And also, I don't think that it's something that you do post-COVID. It's something that we need to do now, right? It needs to be done the whole time. You know, trust needs time to build. It's not something that okay, I'll wait till travel resumes and then I'll see how to rebuild that trust. No, do it now. There's many ways to do that. And for the purposes of today, I'm just going to talk about 3 that we at HK Express put a lot of focus on. Number 1 is being present to the consumer. And secondly, is about putting the customer first. And thirdly, is about engaging with the consumer. And in the midst of doing all that, we are relooking at the whole customer journey and our models to determine what actually matters to them at this point in time. And in that regard, you know, we closely monitor and we are being very flexible in terms of refining our approaches, our media mix according to their media behavior. So let me just talk about putting customer first, this first point, right? So firstly, we know that customers have a lot of worries at this point in time. Right, and there are a lot of things that we've done in order to curb that. For example, hygiene measures. I think all airlines have done that. We've also done that very early on, more than a year ago when COVID started. The vaccination drive is in full gear at the moment. You know, we have also come up with a theme, right, called Stronger Together. The time is now. It's up to us, you know, especially in the aviation, to get going in terms of getting these vaccination rates up so that the borders can open and we can travel. We had our first set of fully vaccinated crew operated a flight to and from Taichung about a couple of months ago. Also, I experimented with the travel passport, vaccine passport, to pave the way on borders opening again. We're exploring all these different solutions. We've done a trial inviting all of our crew members to participate. Yeah, earlier on as well, we've also offered complimentary COVID travel insurance to our customers. From a longer term point of view, we are also exploring touchless journey, you know, where consumers are traveling. We are trying to make most of these touch points touchless. Now, the second point in that is customer care. It's something that we focus on a lot when COVID started, right? It is, for us, it's about giving our customers options and flexibility in their flight changes. When this whole thing started, you know, there were a lot of heated emotions from the consumers, obviously, you know, on whether they are getting their money back, how fast they are getting their money back, when they can travel, all those uncertainties. So we focus a lot of making sure that we are being present to them in our customer care channels. And I'm happy to say that this has also resulted in positive sentiments, especially, you know, on our social, that we all know is a very difficult battleground, you know, for aviation, you know, for airlines, right? A lot of emotions on social. I think we've managed to have built quite good resilience for the brand, you know, throughout this whole period. And in fact, we've even seen some advocates stood up for the brand during this time. Another point about customer care, we've introduced a lot of new communication channels to deliver more options, omni-channel experience for our customers anytime they want to get in touch with us. And again, from a longer term point of view, we are also in the midst of adopting new technologies to drive this evolution of customer service, right? We are, let's talk a little bit about engagement, because I think in terms of marketing and building brand, engagement is very, very important as well. Now, it's not anything new. We've marketers have done this, since the days Facebook was invented. Now, but today, the focus I think is listening and connecting, and I mean really listening, right? Really getting into what is important to consumer, right? In order to do that, right, there's a couple of things. Firstly, we also want to connect, and we are providing bespoke content around the consumer's interest points, right? This is very difficult because over this 500 days, more, close to 1.5 years, we've noticed travel content fatigue. There's only so many times you talk about, do you remember travel? Do you remember going out there? Consumers are already sick of hearing that and not being able to travel, right? So the key here is to inject excitement in this long time of travel starvation, right? We've done a couple of things in order to do that. For example, we put our decommissioned trolleys on sale about a month ago. That got really, really good traction, engagement. People can actually buy it. A taste of travel while you are still...
That is smart.
In the same place. Yeah,
I don't mind getting served dinner in that from at home.
Exactly. We've even had calling make it into a bar, which is great. We did live streaming during Sakura season. There was 1.5 months ago with an influencer in Hong Kong, and as my CEO Mandy mentioned in the earlier session, we've also done a lot in terms of making taste of travel videos in Hong Kong, reminding people that, hey, we know you can't travel at the moment, but you can find taste of Thailand in Hong Kong as well. You can find some great Japanese restaurants or, Japanese stuff, stuff to see in Hong Kong too. So I'm just going to close on this question a little bit, just very quickly. And I think marketing is only the beginning of this relationship with our consumer and with our customer. And I think that marketing must be viewed in the context of this whole full end-to-end journey, right? And work to connect all these dots, right? I feel that marketing is the key leader of this customer journey and the voice of the consumer. So throughout, we definitely have a very strong role to play in terms of not only building, but maintaining the trust of the consumer for when travel resumes. And we know that it's going to be very gradual.
Right. Yeah. I really appreciate you, Eric, diving a little deeper into some of those points. I love the fact that you said marketing is the voice of the consumer, not the voice of the company. And that's a distinction very often, top executives don't see. More importantly, I like the point about being present during the COVID. Don't wait till things are restarting. It's very important to build trust now. And we see a huge dichotomy. Here in Canada, for example, half the airlines literally shut down. So airlines like Porter and Air Transat have been completely shut down. No operations, no customer service, no refund. Whereas airlines like Air Canada and WestJet have been flying throughout the pandemic. And guess who's going to recover faster? Guess who has been issuing refunds and showing empathy? So it's a very important point. Thank you for sharing that. Siddharth, let's move over to you in Bangalore now. India, of course, was in the news not for all the right reasons. And just as things were starting to look good again in January and February, of course, everything came to a standstill. Where are you in terms of the Indian market and how things are recovering and shaping up?
So, Shashank, the last 3 weeks have seen an uptick, but obviously we saw a massive reduction in passenger numbers as the cases went up towards the end. I mean, it started dropping kind of from April onwards, I think was the tangible drop that began to happen. We saw passenger numbers going down significantly. They crept up slowly from February 2020 is when they kind of peaked. It was at about 426,000 passengers flying daily. That recovered by around September to 130,000, so about a third of what it was prior to that. By the end of March or the end of February, so a year down into the pandemic, they were back at about 276,000. They fell from there to 183,000 a day very quickly in 2 months in April. And by the end of May, we're down to 67,000 passengers flying a day. So it really collapsed. I mean, the market really collapsed by a good 82% in a month of an already weak month prior to that. We are seeing the last 3 weeks as having recovered week on week, actually. And the recovery is a lot faster than it was the first time around. As the wave hit, I mean, it's the crescendo has happened, and it's going down at the same kind of pace as it was earlier. But you had something specific, I think, that you wanted to lead into.
Yeah, actually, on the recovery bit, I believe that India is one of the fewest countries in the world which requires PCR testing for domestic travel. Is that right,
That's right.
Siddharth? So
That's
doesn't
right.
that make that a barrier to flight people resuming travel as well? Because that's a significant portion of an LCC's ticket, definitely.
Yes. Now, the reason I think is very similar to Europe in terms of scale and the regional diversity, as well as the incidence of cases that have happened across the country. Each state, because of the federal regulations, has different regulations for who can enter into the state, as well as what requirements there are depending on which state you're coming in from. So it could be that the state of Karnataka, for example, has different requirements for individuals coming in from Maharashtra or Delhi, but a different requirement from another state that does not have such a high incidence of cases. And of course, you're further complicated by transit travel, people taking connecting flights, etc. And the onus on a large part has been on the airlines, because the check really needs to happen at the time of boarding. And since you don't have immigration and passport control, it's effectively ground operations which needs to manage checking the certifications, and you do need an RT-PCR certification to travel in most places. Now, many of the states have also allowed a second dose COVID vaccine certification. So that has helped, as a larger number of people have started getting vaccinated as well. One of the things that we saw in our digital dipsticks, the primary concerns or drivers of confidence in travel for the resurgence in travel, three factors which are evenly distributed, which are driving that resurgence. One is obviously a continued drop in the number of COVID cases. I think when that drops, then people begin to have confidence again. The second is the ease of government or regulatory restrictions. And we find that often as people's travel is uncertain, just the pain of going through an RT-PCR test each time you need to travel. And I've been through that myself. I mean, 3 or 4 times. I'm traveling again this week, despite having got the vaccinations. You still need to, in many states, show the results on the test, and that's just painful. That's a barrier to travel, certainly, because you have to take it within 48 hours before you actually travel. And the third is being vaccinated. And I think that third one is what will really drive the resurgence back in travel. And as these concerns are alleviated, I think the travel and tourism industry in general, destinations, hospitality players, aviation players, are waiting and looking forward to welcoming guests back again to the skies.
Right. Siddharth, I can't help but notice all three factors you've mentioned are basically out of the airline's control. You can't control the dip in number of cases, or if there is a next wave. You cannot control government restrictions, which is right now, the big headache for most airline executives internationally. And you cannot do anything about the increase in vaccination. So given this environment, how do you actually build trust? What are you doing to rebuild trust as an airline?
So there's 3 aspects to it from an aviation marketer's perspective. One is building trust in travel in general. And as you've seen, I mean, those are extrinsic factors, not really within the control of aviation. The second is building trust in aviation as the preferred mode of travel. So for those who need to travel and who want to travel, how do you ensure that aviation is the preferred mode? And the third is building your trust as a brand within the aviation industry. On the second factor, I think that the aviation industry in general across the world has been able to achieve quite a lot. And that stems from the industry's prioritization of safety since inception. The fact that safety has been so important to airlines, and that we've been able to effectively communicate the relative safety of flying over not just other means of transport, but over essentially any other activity that brings people in proximity to strangers or to other people. I mean, our surveys again have shown that respondents have emphatically rated taking a plane as among the safest activities, significantly safer than eating out at a restaurant or visiting a mall. And there's been a substantial reduction in the risk perception even across the past year. So hygiene and safety measures have increased, obviously, in the importance of being among the top 3 drivers of choice from a transportation perspective. And given that context, I mean, our latest consumer survey about a couple of weeks ago, nearly 2/3 of outstation travelers have indicated a clear preference for air travel, even over modes of transport like personal vehicles or hired vehicles, which is actually a dynamic shift from where it was a year ago, where personal vehicles were the majority of what the travel preference lied. So I think the industry in general has been able to communicate that aviation is safe, that we take that seriously. At the same time, what that's done, as you said, is everybody has HEPA filters, right? That universal adoption and communication of safety measures means that that's not contributing to differentiation between brands. So it's incumbent upon responsible brands who have a long-term orientation to actually resist the temptation of driving demand through short-sighted tactics like, say, undercutting prices in a demand scenario that is not driven by discretionary demand, or eroding service standards, or, for example, being too keen to sell meals, or to sell the extra space on the flight. And remember that what is important in consumers' minds is, and what enables the crew to actually adhere to things like the ability to wear masks, is the fact that you're focusing on those efforts more. And I think there's 2 aspects again to that. One is that as a brand, you need to establish in this period that you're a responsible member of the community. How you're doing that by the effort that you're making in your own country to fight the pandemic, whether that's through the transportation of vaccines, or in our case, for example, transporting migrant populations back to their hometowns who didn't have access, first-time flyers, moving into vernacular modes of communication for a lot of these first-time flyers. And the second is doing what marketers always need to do, as Eric said, put the customer first. Address distinct audiences who you can address without fighting for the same share of the pie, because that pie is a lot smaller. And look at that with relevant, differentiated, personalized proposition. And that's, I think, where the focus will remain for a long time to come.
Right. Thank you so much, Siddharth, for sharing that context. It's so important to see where things are, and we know why we've all been busy now. You know, everyone knows what's been keeping busy. Which brings me to Andrew. Now, I think, Andrew, you're in possibly one of the most exciting yet unknown regions or parts right now with Kuwait and the restrictions. But I know you've been really dancing like Jagger, because you've been making hay while the sun shines and really acing the constraints. I remember when you couldn't fly passengers from Pakistan, you flew a plane load of mangoes. And when you had your 320 Neos getting delivered and flights to London weren't very full, now you have launched flights. I think passengers who are vaccinated can fly from Yerevan to Tashkent to all these cities that you wouldn't think there'd be a network. But hey, if you're vaccinated, come fly. You've come a long way since we last spoke, Andrew. But please, I'd love to hear how you have built trust in travel.
Well, the first thing, good morning, everybody. First thing, Shashank, I think Kuwait Airport was the first airport to be closed around the world on March the 13th last year. So nobody could come in. Initially, nobody could go out, but outbound was still allowed. But the problem for us was straight away was not about maintaining trust in the brand. It was actually maintaining salience in the brand, because if people couldn't fly, they weren't interested in airline brands whatsoever. And therefore, you know, it was really important to protect our brand. We did get, during the period of time between effectively March and August last year, we really turned our focus from being the support to sales to being involved in more of a community role. Jazeera supported the government with setting up a COVID testing center in what was used to be our park and fly parking lot. So that became a very important part of engaging with the community and supporting the drive for testing and beyond. We also supported the government in repatriating Kuwaiti citizens back into the country who were stranded outside. So our message was all about how we were involved in helping as much as possible. So that maintained two things. One, maintained salience in our brand, but also gave us positive sentiment from customers who couldn't otherwise fly with us. So and I think that community role has been maintained. You mentioned, flying in mangoes, also flying in cargo. We became a cargo airline, as I'm sure many others did over this period of time. We got special clearance, as many others did, to use our cabin interiors for stocking food items, etc. And we brought in a lot of food items, medical items that were wanted into the country. So I think that was the key part of the role. Yes, well done. Yes.
Those are the mangoes on a Karachi flight.
Yes, so well done. Yes. So yeah, it was a time of showing how we were switching our focus and still, well, for us, desperately trying to operate some commercial flights, but also show what we were doing to the community. And I think that CSR role is something that we're going to be maintaining post-pandemic, is that we've learned a lot how important that has been, and we don't want to lose that contact with the community. So I think that's going to be a key part of our marketing going forwards. I mean, obviously, certainly, we've already discussed during the pandemic, everybody, put out their videos about, how safe flying was in general, that, we've got the HEPA filters, and aircraft interiors have never been so clean. If you remember a couple of years ago, people were kind of laughing a bit at that Naomi Campbell video of her wiping down
everything up.
I think it was a Qatar Airways business class seat. Everyone thought she was a bit crazy and cuckoo, but we're not laughing at her now. She was the person who was had the foresight to say, well, actually, interiors aren't that clean, but now they certainly are, and I think that's a message that we've got through to people. We ran a big travel survey a couple of months ago now, and really consumers do believe that aircraft are very clean inside. They know people are PCR tested, they know crews are vaccinated, and we're pushing out the fully vaccinated crew message. And I think that's reassured people to have trust in flying, let alone just trust in your brand. And that is now, if you like, hygiene has become the hygiene factor. So I don't think we need to keep reinforcing it, providing we keep it bubbling under, in the sense that people know, yes, we believe that the airlines are keeping themselves or the interiors as clean as possible, and also the airports as well. But I think one of the other things about going forwards as air travel has been opening up gradually around the world is that most people are concerned about changing their tickets. What happens if flights get cancelled? What happens if, we've got this traffic light system in the UK at the moment where, if you get switched from a green to an amber country while you're away on holiday and have to come back and quarantine, or you want to change your flight. So I think it's really important that we maintain the messaging about you've got full flexibility on your tickets. I know that's kind of anathema to us in the low-cost business, because we like to charge people for changing their minds. But for a while, I think we're going to have to, bear with it and say, look, it's most important that we make our customers feel as confident as possible that when they fly, they can change their ticket. And I know that's something we're going to, everybody's looking at continuing. I think, overall, though, in terms of, is it the airlines that need to rebuild trust? My answer would be, it's actually governments that have to rebuild trust, because they're the ones who really incurred the wrath of travelers and the airline industry, because they've often sent out confusing and constantly changing rules. And that's something that does need to settle down. And I think, over time, there's going to be more uniformity about the rules for flying, but so far every country's operated a different system. There's been no industry-wide acceptable norm. I think, I know IATA have done their best, but I don't think they've done enough. And I think it's going to be important, for the next pandemic, that we have our act together, and that the systems are in place, whether they are app-based, testing, certification, vaccinations, etc. I think that's going to be really important. So yeah, I think the trust is already being built back by the brands. I think in terms of marketing, we're going to continue to engage with people as much as we have done during the pandemic. And I think we're all agreed we've all been engaged probably even more with our customers than we were previously. And I think that's been a good thing and will continue. But the overall levels of trust, it's going to be government-led, and I think we're seeing now there's a gradual convergence of what trust and flying is going to involve, which will be, yep, you do need to be vaccinated, and I think that's going to be the key to flying. Obviously, not everybody can be vaccinated, but for those who have been, that's going to be the key to opening it up, and hopefully reducing the testing regimes as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and this gives me a perfect segue into my next question, which was about challenges. And actually, because you mentioned this, I'm going to share a Jazeera infographic that you shared. If you look on the right side of the chart, I think it's universally applicable here. What are the biggest barriers when it comes to people who want to travel? And looks like quarantine kills travel, flat out. Just if there's a quarantine requirement, people will not travel. 40% will not travel. Whereas the third one I like, would you get vaccinated if required to fly? Hey, 89%, would you prefer a mobile boarding pass? Yes, people don't like to touch anything. Would you prefer to use e-gate? Looks like touchless is in, quarantines are out. There is a general level of trust about aircraft cabins and safety. So let me, bring this back to the panel, perhaps starting with Akira-san once again. What do you see as the biggest barrier in people restarting to travel? We've seen how the Olympics have gone from a large showcase piece to smaller and smaller and smaller. And you've been, of course, a critical partner as Japan Airlines as the official partner of the Olympics. So you probably have some really major insights for us on what's stopping people to travel.
Yeah, I think I'll touch on the Olympics later, but I think what has been really confusing for both airlines and travelers is that we have had waves of travel and no travel. So matching demand and supply has been a daunting challenge, but adding to that a lot of uncertainty, new variant, another lockdown, sentiments and norms have changed, and people do fight over that. Now, for example, is it okay to not wear masks versus people say that, it's still not safe yet. And as you mentioned, there's huge fear of hassle, and like you've shown in your slide around quarantine. And there are also many things beyond our control, as was mentioned earlier on. Distribution, supply of vaccination, for example, is not what we airlines can do. But I like what Angel mentioned about really having the act together. How can we focus on things we can work on collaboratively to remove some of the challenges that we have, to convince people that you don't have to go through all that. And I think the important thing is to look at not just individual parts of the journey. So airlines may be doing all right, but what about quarantine? What about borders? What about in destination? I think we have to really look at the full journey, and if you break them down and look at in terms of a value chain, we have to look at the full value chain and see which part requires work now and which are the bottlenecks that are inhibiting people from traveling, and try to get that right. I mean, it won't happen overnight, but I think it really requires more collaborative effort amongst airlines, governments, and all other stakeholders involved to make sure that we put the act together and have some form of standard.
Right, common standards is the holy grail here, isn't it? As Andrew alluded to as well. I wish we could just snap and it would come like that. But let me move on to Eric. Thank you, Akira-san, for those insights. Earlier we were talking about how we need to build trust in travel as step one, and then airline as a preferred mode. And I think health safety measures we're all taking help with that, right? It's airline as the safest mode of travel. Done. But once that's done, how do you ensure that your brand is the preferred brand? How do you differentiate your brand post-pandemic? Perhaps Eric, you can dive in first.
Definitely. Well, as we all know, the recovery will be very gradual. We can't expect to come out of this in a short period of time. Now, for when COVID hit, digital transformation actually accelerated overnight, right? Most companies, with time on our hands, we are making sure that, we get closer to the customer in terms of knowing what they need, right? In terms of personalization, data analytic, I'm pretty sure the situation is similar with most airlines, right? So the result of this is the customer expectation, I think, post-COVID will have skyrocketed overnight, right? Expecting a hyper-personalized experience. So I think brands and companies, airlines need to be ready for this. Right now is the time to build the right data and tech foundation in order to be prepared for that day. And we've been doing a lot of these throughout most of our customer touch points, be it our direct channels, our customer care touch points, so on and so forth, right? So closer to marketing, I think the crisis has resulted that for a need for this marketing agility to pivot according to the moment. I think, all of us sitting here can agree to that. This means really faster decision making, being flexible across our creative, our content, right? Things will change, within a moment's notice about our messaging, even our budgeting. We know that that's obviously a big constraint in terms of how much we can spend in order to get the engagement we require, the channels that we go out, to reach the consumers, as well as the media that we engage, right? So I think the tool of disposal at this point in time is very, very few compared to before COVID, right? And I would say the same thing, that do not wait until post-pandemic, and this is an ongoing exercise, right? Again, be present now, build trust now, extend this into post-pandemic, use all the existing tools that you have in your disposal, right? And connect with the consumers, they will feel it, right? Another point is look at, the most efficient way to do things, rally all the partners around. We are all in this together in the travel industry, we know that, right? So on our side, we are very close to the prefectural governments and the tourism board, in Japan or in Thailand, everyone is raring to see travel opening up again. So we are engaged with them much more than ever, in terms of getting the content and the messaging out to our consumers, which is their customers as well.
Very, very, very important, Eric. I'm curious to hear, Siddharth, how are you differentiating? Because India is a tough market to compete in, right? How do you differentiate AirAsia as you emerge from the pandemic?
So it's a difficult one. It is a tough market to compete in. It's a swath dominated by LCC players with one large dominant player, and things have changed a lot across the last year. And I think one of the things which I'll pick up on what Eric was speaking about is the realization that the simple interventions that being digital first enables. And I think that's something that AirAsia as an airline has always been able to achieve and pride itself in, and pivot very quickly. One, of course, digital gives you a lot more agility to be able to move faster. The second is the sheer amount of data and analytics that are coming in now. If you look at the kind of web check-in rates that India used to get a year and a half ago, which was about 25-30%, now it's nearly universal. It's 98% web check-ins happening. Wow. Also thanks to government mandates that web check-ins must happen, health and contact declaration forms must be filled in advance. Because of that, and because the onus is on the airline, you now potentially have data not just on sensitive elements like health and personal data, but you also have data on where people are flying to, including which PIN codes they're staying at and what addresses they're staying at. And it's important that one, you're seen as a brand that the community can trust, that consumers trust, because what has also happened at the same time is demographics have changed. A lot of younger consumers are traveling, or their reduction in travel has been a lot less than older demographics. And we're tracking three distinct demographics from a behavioral perspective. Dormant travelers who used to fly, but haven't flown for about a year now. And that's dominated by people above the age of 50, as well as young children, infants, etc., families essentially. Those that have flown recently who are active, and those that are potential, who have expressed an interest to fly in the next few months. And within those categories, what you see is that obviously younger consumers are more open to digital adoption. They're more open to doing things like web check-in. And as a brand, you need to be able to enable that. So one of the differentiators we have, for instance, is we allow web check-in to happen 14 days before the travel date, whereas most of our other airlines in India allow it within 48 hours only. That means that you have the data for a lot longer, and you're able to personalize their experiences. You're able to offer them relevant other partnerships that we've entered into, like baggage delivery service from your home to the airport, so you don't have to lug your bags in an Uber. You don't have to touching minimize services, etc. We've tied up with Avis, for example, as a car rental organization, because we realized that there's a position for other brands in the travel ecosystem that are also offering seamless, contactless, safe travel experiences. And all of that enables you to minimize queuing, to minimize turnaround times at the airport. Minimizing time is another thing. I think turnarounds is another thing that we're good at. So you leverage what you're good at, and that enables you to ensure a safer, smoother, more tangible, touchless travel experience. And that begins to build a differentiation in people's minds, because they see that. They see the speed at which you're able to process a refund, for example, right. The speed at which you're able to address queries through your chatbot. All of those become important, I think, in driving confidence in the consumers that there is a brand that will react quickly. A lot of the pain that people have been feeling, not just in aviation, but across the world, I think, has been on getting in touch with customer service. And if you're able to use digital to leverage that and as a tangible proof point, then that becomes an automatic differentiator that you don't need to talk about. It's evident, and those customers will come back again then to you.
Right. Right. I like the differentiation. Akira-san, you had something to add here.
Yeah, just a quick point. I think definitely hyper-personalization and digital, it's going to be the way forward. But I just want to point out that I think across all industry, we are increasingly conscious of being more purpose-driven. I think the pandemic has really compelled us all to stop, think, and reflect and say, why are we here? What's our purpose? Are we creating problems, or are we solving problems? And I think putting purpose into practice has become really something that increasingly more and more consumers expect brands to deliver, not just in lofty words and in CSR message, but actually really to do something about addressing immediate concerns. So I think the purpose-driven thing is going to be important. And with that, we in Japan Airlines, we've just announced our new medium-term plan. And interestingly, we have added, in addition to our business strategy and finance strategy, we have added an ESG strategy to have a strong focus on being purpose-driven.
Exactly, you are absolutely right. And if I recall, I think a few months ago, Eric from HK Express, I think you had shared when the Apple's Facebook war was going on or about privacy. I remember Tim Cook had said, do I want a business that serves my customer, or one that takes advantage of my customers to serve my business? The path of least resistance is rarely the path of wisdom. And I think that is something that applies today to aviation industry as we rebound, isn't it?
You remember that post?
I still remember, because I then went on to read the full post that you shared, Eric. So thank you.
Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, indeed. Andrew, coming to you, you of course do not have a homogeneous market like Akira-san or Siddharth can benefit from. Yours is flying from Tashkent to Yerevan to London Gatwick, and of course you've got the mangoes from Karachi, so different customer segment there. But how do you differentiate your brand when there's so much beyond your control there?
Well, I think we've already been discussing how important it's been to maintain and increase, if you like, customer care levels and service. I mean, if we go back to the last major crisis I can really recall is the Icelandic volcano back in April 2010, where particularly for the Gulf hubs in the Middle East, we experienced where we had a lot of passengers flowing through from the east trying to get to Europe, and they were holed up in the hubs, and it was for about a period of about 10 days. And that was a crisis that wasn't man-made, and it was important to look after passengers extremely well during that time because there was complete chaos. But I think, when you look at what's happened now again with the pandemic, is that passengers are actually quite forgiving of natural disasters in terms of the way they affect travel. They're not blaming the airlines for this, although they want us to do as much as possible to ease their pain. But overall, they will come back quite quickly. We've already seen from our surveys there's a huge pent-up demand for travel, and it just needs to be uncorked as vaccinations permit and other restrictions are relaxed. So I think the watchword is going to be about how we act as well as communicate in terms of maintaining these customer care levels, because clearly some passengers are still going to be very nervous about flying, and we've all got to show how grateful we are actually that we've got the business back. Because I know for sure, passengers are certainly grateful that we're flying again, and I think it's that kind of relationship that that they're pleased we're back and we're pleased they're back.
Right. It's got to be mutual. Andrew, you of course mentioned the Icelandic volcano, which was a defining moment. I remember 2011. Yeah. It was, or 2010. 2010. Yeah, who would forget, right? It was a defining moment where social media became central.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it was PR and social media at the time. I remember I was in Abu Dhabi, and we're up in the early hours of the morning preparing advertising, social media posts, just to keep the communication going and explaining what was happening. It turned into what was potentially a massive PR disaster into a success story, because by looking after passengers well, they didn't want to leave Abu Dhabi at the time, so they're quite happy to stay there rather than move on with their journey. We were trying to pull them out of their hotels to catch the flights. They started resuming. I think the looking after the passenger, I just said, is the critical factor, and and we talked about more digitalization. Yes, it means there's less contact with a passenger because they don't have to, get engaged with check-in staff and everything else. But that's even more the reason to find other ways of connecting with our passengers to show that we are caring and we are providing the service. The human contact is something that you can't ignore, and clearly our frontline brand ambassadors are our crew, and they're the ones that need to carry that care message as much as possible. And of course, telling everybody they're fully vaccinated, they're wearing masks still. Our travel survey actually thought that people and crew will be wearing masks maybe for the next 12 months. Now, in Asian markets, that's less of a sort of cultural shock. But for us, if I felt I was going to have to wear a mask for the next 12 months, I'm already thinking that's a long, long time. But if that's what it takes to engage and keep the trust of our passengers going, then that's the thing that we'll continue with. It's a small ask, really.
Yeah, I really kickstarted the last question of the panel, since we're about to hit the top of the hour. What is the one lesson from past crises that you've taken? And Andrew, thank you for sharing. Maybe we can have Akira-san go next on the same question.
Yeah, I think what I experience today is in many ways unprecedented, in the sense that it's not something we can just take from past experience and plug it in and apply today. There are things like repurposing, prioritizing, making difficult decisions, speed, digital transformation, resilience, leadership, and so forth. But from a marketing point of view, someone once said that the marketing industry is the best funded and the largest social science experiment in human history. I think that's true in that how people actually behave can be very different from what we think as being rational. So I think the past 16 months also have been a huge learning opportunity for us to understand what really matters to people and the change they would like to see. So I think we are still in the process of learning.
Right, absolutely. Well put there. Eric, what do you think? What's your take?
Yeah, I definitely agree that there is nothing similar that we have met in the past, like COVID. Mainly, I think due to the length of it, right? Even SARS before was a 3 to 5 month recovery. We are going into 1.5 to 2 years now, right? Very unprecedented on a global scale, especially the how wide ranging of it. But if there's one thing I'd like to share, and this is also from my past experience in FMCG and retail as well, is don't dwell on the past, move the brand forward, right? Always moving forward, right? Because past crises have shown that brands that connect well with consumers emerge stronger, right? And this again is being present. Marketing is still a vitally crucial role in this crisis, right? Because again, the need to refocus, pivot, and staying agile. So I think that's a very, very good reason we're all keeping very busy. We'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. End of the day, take care of your customers. They will stick with you. They will remember it. And yeah, people like to remember the positive things. So at the end of the day, the crisis is over. They remember that, hey, this brand has done something good for me in the past. I'll remember that. So, I end this with the Chinese saying is, every crisis is an opportunity, obviously. Just have to adapt to the changing consumer need. And to be honest with you, I don't think we have any other choice, right? We just need to get on with it. Yes.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you for that wisdom, Eric, from Hong Kong. Siddharth, what would you add? Any lessons from past crises? How are you taking this?
I think one lesson certainly is that disruption is the nature of the industry. And we've seen that across various different past crises as well. There's an obvious change in the macroeconomic drivers across the world in travel, and that makes it ripe for disruption. And by disruption, I mean the creation of new markets, of new value networks, which will typically displace the old ways of doing things. So the ones that are the quickest to adapt are the ones that will survive. And I want to add on what Akira-san had said about purpose and brands with purpose. And we've seen that ourselves. I've added, for example, sustainability to part of the portfolio that I manage. And we think that is something that will be there for a while to stay, and is something that is more and more important, especially in the aviation industry. And I really think that at this opportunity of disruption, as an industry and marketer especially, we need to reconsider the way in which we define ourselves. We need to think of ourselves not as being part of the transportation industry, but as being part of the experience industry. Because the needs for transportation have largely been disrupted, whether it's corporate travel, moving from personal to virtual meetings, or the massive pent-up demand that there is for experiential travel. I think that's what we need to address and go back to the fundamentals of what the consumer needs, the value that the consumer gets, the hedonic value from enjoyment and from experiences, and not the rational value from moving from one place to another. That's not the role that we're doing. I think that will change things for a long time to come.
Right. Very nice. I think that sums it up very nicely, that we're in the customer, or we're in the experience industry. And I'm going to take just the next couple of minutes as we hit the top of the hour to sort of summarize some of the insights that I've taken down during the panel. And I think that we started off with Akira-san sharing the importance of the brand and why marketing is still relevant in these times. Customer experience, customer service, simple acts like sharing that all of you shared, like 100% vaccinated staff, how that builds trust. I think that's critical. And then Eric, of course, you talked about marketing as the voice of the customer and not the brand, which I truly like, because you're solving customer service issues. You're being present right now, and hence building brand throughout the pandemic rather than waiting for the times to change. And Siddharth, thanks for sharing such a unique view from within India. We've all been watching from the outside, and it's good to see that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I think your focus on digital and now even sustainability is refreshing, not just from AirAsia India, but AirAsia perspective. We've all seen AirAsia pivot heavily into digital as a brand in itself, and it is good to see that's transpiring into India as well. I like the three traveler personas you shared as well: dormant travelers, the flown recently, and then those who intend to fly, because they have very different fears that we have to address, very different nature of messages we have to send across and communicate with to rebuild trust. And Andrew, thank you also for sharing some very important thoughts about ensuring that the salience of brand is important right now. It's about survival rather than building trust, because if borders are shut, no one's flying, no one's looking at airline ads. And I think Eric had said earlier, there was too many PBT posts. How many times can you look back at your travel pictures and feel good about it. After that, FOMO is real, and people don't want to see more of those. So I think I do see the light of the end at the end of the tunnel, and I think marketers are going to have a huge role in playing in ensuring that we rebuild trust in travel, we rebuild trust in aviation as an industry, and of course, still be able to differentiate yourself from competitors doing the little things that our brands do well. Thank you very much once again, everyone, for chiming in. It was a pleasure hosting this panel. And how's that for on-time performance?
Okay,
Johnny, welcome back.
Perfect.
Thank you as well, Siddhartha, Eric, Akira, Andrew, for a really interesting discussion. The recording will be available on demand via the platform for anyone that has signed in late to this. And again, thanks again to all of the panelists. There are more live sessions today taking place, so do stay tuned, and thank you once again. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.